Dear denizens of Earth, welcome to Real Turkey channel. This is Atilla Yeşilara and we're going to talk about East Med energy games, Med being Mediterranean. I read the commentary from you. One of our distinguished audience said, Mr. Yeşilara, don't you have anything good to say about your country? Food is good, right? Traffic lights have started working recently, and most people drive on green and stop on red. Yeah, to me, the most important duty of a patriot is constructive criticism, because that's the only way a country can better itself. And all governments are bastards. So that's my approach to the Real Turkey channel, and it shall remain that way. But, there are some good things happening, one of which is a rare victory in the East Med energy games, which really are games, as I will explain later in this video. Turkey has signed an exclusive economic zone agreement with Libya, which directly interrupts the route of a subterranean or underwater pipeline proposed by the opposing alliance consisting of Greek Cypriotes, Egypt, and Israel, that will be built presumably from either the Greek side of Cyprus to Italy or the Greek mainland, which would transport the hydrocarbon riches of East Mediterranean, mostly being natural gas, to the European continent. Because if you look at the Mediterranean basin, there's a lot of hydrocarbons, that's crude oil and natural gas, waiting for customers, and a lot of poor customers in North Africa who are willing to buy but don't have the capacity to pay, and a lot of the rich customers in Europe who would buy and pay. So everybody wants to build pipelines or sell to Europe. And that proposed pipeline would bypass Turkey and Turkish Cyprus and directly pump the gas to Europe. So this strange maritime agreement, if you imagine the map in your head, Turkey is at the northern end of Eastern Med, and Libya is at the southern and western end, towards the western end. It's a strange maritime border demarcation agreement, which looks like an hourglass. It essentially separates the maritime borders between Libya and Turkey, allocating half of that portion of the Eastern Mediterranean to Turkey and the other half to Libya. It looks silly because it encompasses a lot of the shores that are very close to Greece. But that's the problem with these exclusive economic zone or maritime borders agreements. In the United States, or in general in North America, where all the nations are facing the ocean, you can claim as much as your maritime border since there is no one facing you. In Black Sea, though it's a closed sea, it's fairly easy because there are no islands. In Eastern Mediterranean, it's a big problem, because if you look at the map, first of all, there's a Cyprus issue. Cyprus is right across Turkey, I think 20 miles or so, right? 20 miles or so from the main Turkish land. And it's divided between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots. But the entire world recognizes the Greek Cypriots as the only sovereign, that's the only government of the island, which makes Turkish Cypriots shadow people. They don't exist in the eyes of the global community. And Greek Cypriots claim all the natural gas and potential oil finds as their own wealth. And thereby they claim all the continental shelf of the island, which means anything beyond 3 miles offshore of Turkey belongs to Greek Cypriots. The same situation applies to Greece and Turkey, which has caused most of the conflicts since 1920s, which is that Greek has sovereignty over the Aegean islands and they should enjoy it forever. It is theirs. Unfortunately, some of these islands are as close as 2 miles to the Turkish mainland, which means from most of Turkey, you can't really access the Mediterranean without permission from Greece, which doesn't make sense because the entire population of the Aegean Islands is something like 1 million, whereas the Turkish mainland inhabits 70 million people. It's not equitable. It doesn't make sense. So that's a big, quagmire there. And potentially, it's not just a political issue or one that goes back to the historical enmity between Turkey and Greece, but one that may have very, very huge economic impact. Israel already discovered two huge offshore natural gas fields and pretty much guaranteed its domestic gas needs for the next 100 years. In fact, it may soon establish a wealth fund. Egypt too, I forget the name of the gas field, has discovered one, and it's now slowly starting to serve its own domestic market. Greek Cypriots can't do the same thing, though they have discovered the Aphrodite field, simply because it's either too deep or they don't have the financing to build a pipeline to the Greek portion of the island. Now, of course, serving your domestic market is fine, but the lucrative business is to sell it abroad to generate export revenues. And there you have a problem. This is why Greece, Greek Cypriots, Israel, and Egypt have formed this coalition to exploit this natural gas. And that excludes Turkey. But the silly thing about this anti-Turkey coalition is that the simplest and most efficient way, cheapest way to export the gas to Europe is to build a pipeline from Israel to Cyprus, then to Cyprus, from Cyprus to Turkey, and connected to the Turkish energy grid, TANAP, for instance, and immediately ship it to Europe. But since Turkey doesn't recognize Greek Cypriots and Greek Cypriots don't recognize Turkey, it's not happening. In that sense, Turkey has gained a victory because now as long as the national government of Libya is in power, the rival alliance cannot build a pipeline, and they have to look for alternative venues of exporting their natural gas, which is very expensive. Besides, the United States is pumping a lot of liquefied natural gas, which is inundating the European market. Qatar is doing pretty much the same thing. And this story will go on forever. The silly thing, the reason why all of this is just saber rattling and settling of old historical accounts rather than a clash between economic interests, is that because there is really no need to dig deep and pump all that gas. It would cost twice as much as gas from Russia to Europe to build a pipeline to transport East Mediterranean gas to Europe. And that's at current prices. Natural gas prices are very likely to fall in the coming years because, as I've said, the exporting countries are building huge liquefaction facilities and the tanker fleet that goes with it, which could easily sell LNG to importing countries, and importing countries prefer that instead of sharing the upfront costs of building huge pipelines and committing to purchasing agreements for the next 30 years. Moreover, Europe, and that's commendable, is increasingly becoming environmentally conscious and is doing its utmost to reduce the carbon footprint of the continent, which means it will use less natural gas. Well, it will first switch from other more polluting energy sources to natural gas and then to renewables, and also would spend more on conservation. So there is no way, even if we solve all of our difficulties, short of perhaps a pipeline through Turkey, there is no way to use this hydrocarbon riches and everybody will serve their domestic market. But in the meantime, it's a good way for 200-year, 300-year-old hostilities to be brought to the agenda again and to threaten each other. Thank you very much. This is Atilla Yeşilada from Real Turkey channel. If you like this broadcast and other broadcasts about Turkish and Mediterranean futility, please share it with your loved ones and do subscribe, please.